The penthouse was fortified with steel, guarded by killers, wrapped in glass thicker than riot shields. But none of it mattered. Only the screaming did. Byeol thrashed in Seo Jun's arms, tiny body rigid, face a mottled purple. The sound ricocheted off marble walls, stabbing through the skull, unending. Every doctor he'd flown in said the same thing. Sensory overload, autistic distress response, no medical emergency. But a child who hadn't slept in 43 days was dying in front of him. Any fool could see that. Please, Seo Jun whispered, voice cracking like old stone. His tie hung loose, shirt stained with spit up and formula. Shadows under his eyes bruised his face. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had killed men for far smaller inconveniences. Yet here he was, begging an infant for mercy. 4 nannies had quit. A Swiss specialist fled after 10 minutes with the child. Even a shaman had thrown his incense down and shouted that the baby carried the storm of 1,000 ghosts. The Black Dragon Council kept sending messages. Your son is not the only crisis. Your absence is being noticed. Power was slipping. His lieutenants were whispering. But Byeol let out a choking, breathless cry that made Seo Jun's stomach drop, and suddenly, the syndicate meant nothing. Driver! He rasped, lifting the baby against his shoulder as Byeol arched and wailed. Get the car! We're going! To where, boss? Seo Jun stared down at his son, his heir, his impossible puzzle, his unraveling. To the Hope Light Women's Shelter in Itaewon. Now. Nobody questioned the order, though every man in the room went still. A mafia king had no place in a refuge for broken mothers and runaway wives, but desperation had burned through pride. He carried his screaming child through the shelter doors like a fallen king who no longer cared about thrones. And that's where he found her. A tall black woman wrapped in vibrant Ankara cloth, dark skin glowing under weak fluorescent lights, one breast exposed as she calmly nursed another shelter baby. Her presence was a kind of quiet gravity, steady and unbothered, even as his armed shadows filled the doorway. She looked up at him, not afraid, not impressed, just tired and resolute. Seo Jun's throat tightened. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't command. He pleaded, Please, save my son. For a heartbeat, the only sound in the cramped shelter kitchen was Byeol's piercing scream. Raw, ragged, endless. Then chairs scraped. Mothers gasped. A few instinctively shielded their babies as the armed men behind Seo Jun stepped farther inside. Black coats brushing against donated strollers and stacks of powdered formula. The Hope Light. Women's shelter was not built for this kind of intrusion. It was built for softness, warm, stale air, heavy with baby powder and microwaved rice, faded murals of cartoon bears, shelves of mismatched bottles, the faint hum of an ancient heater struggling through the winter night. This was a place held together by tired hope, and whatever kindness could be scraped together by women who had already survived the worst. But all of that felt too fragile now, swallowed by the presence of a man whose name was spoken in back alleys like a curse. Except by her. Alexandra Okafor didn't flinch. She sat on the cracked vinyl couch, tall and regal despite the second-hand Ankara cloth wrapped around her. Her dark skin glowed under the flickering fluorescent tube above her head. One arm cradled a shelter infant at her breast. The baby latched contentedly, tiny fingers curled into her wrap. She looked exhausted, yes, but steady. Steady in a way that made even the armed men hesitate. Her gaze drifted to Seo Jun, then to the screaming child in his arms. The purple face, the trembling limbs, the tiny fists clawing at the air. She swallowed. The softness in her eyes warred with something else. Wariness, recognition, survival instinct. "Give him to me," she said, quietly. Seo Jun didn't move at first. His jaw clenched. Tattoos along his throat flexed as he struggled to breathe. For a man who commanded death with a glance, the idea of handing his son to a stranger felt like exposing his throat to a blade. But Byeol let out a choking yowl, and that decided it. He crossed the small space, king of Seoul's underworld, stepping around discarded toys and a basket of donated blankets, and knelt before her. His hands shook. The syndicate would never believe him capable of that, of trembling. Alex gently shifted the shelter baby in her left arm, passing the infant to a nearby young mother who watched with wide, frightened eyes. Then she extended her right arm toward Seo Jun. "Here," she said softly, "let me try." He hesitated only a moment before lowering Byeol into her waiting arms. The baby fought at first, arching, gasping, tiny legs kicking in frantic rhythm. He was still screaming, the sound raw enough to split bone. But Alex moved with practiced grace. The kind earned only by caring for too many infants with too few resources. She adjusted her wrap, exposing her breast again, and brought Byeol close. And then, the miracle. The moment his cheek brushed her skin, Byeol froze. His whole body shuddered. His limbs loosened. The scream caught midair and dissolved into a wet, trembling hiccup. Alex held him steady, her hand warm against the back of his tiny head. "It's okay," she whispered, voice dipped in something ancient, Igbo lullaby cadence, a hum older than any language in this building. Byeol whimpered once, twice, then silence. 43 days of relentless crying, erased in a single breath. Seo Jun stared as if witnessing the supernatural. His mouth parted, his shoulders sinking as tension bled out of him so quickly he nearly sagged to the floor. He had forgotten what quiet sounded like. He had forgotten what his son looked like without pain carved across his tiny features. But the miracle wasn't finished. Byeol nuzzled, searching instinctively, and Alex guided him gently. He latched immediately. No hesitation, no fuss, no resistance. He drank greedily, desperately, as if he had been starving since the day he was born. Tears blurred Alex's vision, not from pain, but from something deeper. Recognition, familiarity, a maternal instinct sharpened by months of nursing shelter babies whose mothers couldn't. But fear flickered underneath. This was the son of a dangerous man, a man whose presence made every woman in the room stiffen like prey, sensing a predator. Still, she held Byeol closer. Across from her, Seo Jun could barely breathe. The silence hit him like a tidal wave, almost violent in its relief. His hands, still suspended in the air where he'd passed his son into her arms, trembled openly now. He didn't try to hide it. He stopped, he whispered. How did you do that?" Alex didn't answer right away. She didn't know. Some babies calmed at heartbeat. Some responded to warmth. Some needed skin contact. Some needed breast milk from a body that had known trauma, exhaustion, survival. She didn't say any of that. She just kept holding the child who had found peace on her chest. One of the shelter women whispered a prayer. Another made the sign of the cross. The armed men exchanged confused looks, weapons lowered, their boss forgotten for a moment in the face of something so simple yet impossible. Alex finally lifted her gaze to Seo Jun. I don't know how, she said quietly, but he's okay now. Seo Jun swallowed hard, his vision blurred at the edges, a dizzy mix of relief, awe, and something terrifyingly close to gratitude. He knelt lower, almost sitting on the worn linoleum floor, and watched his son drink like he had never eaten before. This is the first time, he whispered. The first silence. Alex blinked. 43 days? She asked. Yes. His voice cracked. Every hour. Every minute. She exhaled, the sound half pain, half understanding. Survival recognized survival. Exhaustion recognized exhaustion. And compassion. Stubborn, inconvenient, reckless, rose in her chest like a tide she couldn't stop. Byeol's tiny body softened entirely, molding against her as if he had always belonged there. His breath slowed, his fingers unclenched, and within minutes, he was asleep, mouth still latched, peaceful for the first time since entering the world. The room was utterly still. Seo Jun just stared at the woman, at the baby, at the impossible quiet, at the life he had built on blood and fear, suddenly dwarfed by the sight of his son sleeping safely against a stranger's heart. Alex touched Byeol's back gently, thumb tracing a soothing circle. She did not smile. She did not coo. But something in her expression softened. A small flicker of tenderness she hadn't shown anyone in months. Let him rest, she said, voice low. Seo Jun's breath hitched. He nodded, unable to find words. Because, in that moment, watching his autistic son sleep on the chest of a woman he'd never met, he realized a truth far more devastating than any gunshot or betrayal. He had just witnessed something worth more than his entire empire. And he had no idea what it would cost him. Alex had expected the Mafia boss to take his now sleeping son and vanish back into whatever dark corner of Seoul he ruled. Instead, Seo Jun did not move. He stayed kneeling on the shelter's cracked linoleum floor, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of Byeol's tiny back as the baby slept against her chest. The silence felt unreal, too fragile, too precious. If he stood, breathed too loudly, or blinked wrong, he feared it would shatter. When Alex shifted, careful not to wake the child, Seo Jun finally spoke. I'm not leaving, he said. A few of the shelter women tensed. One clutched her toddler closer. The armed men outside the doorway straightened. Alex raised a brow. This is a women's shelter. You can't stay here. I wasn't asking permission, Seo Jun replied, soft but fierce. His eyes were red, the tattoos along his throat stark against his pale skin. I will do whatever it takes, pay whatever it takes, just stay with him, keep him alive. There it was again, the plea beneath the armor, the desperation bleeding through his iron control. Alex inhaled slowly. Money doesn't fix everything. It fixes most things, he countered. And for the rest, I have influence. I don't want influence. Her voice sharpened. And I don't need a gangster buying my time. A flicker of something, hurt, crossed his expression, quickly swallowed by determination. I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to save my son. He spoke the words quietly, but the impact was heavy enough to settle in Alex's chest. She looked down at Byeol, at the tiny fingers curled in her Ankara wrap. The baby's breath puffed warm against her skin. She sighed. I'm undocumented. Seo Jun blinked. What? I overstayed my visa. 2 years now. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like describing a weather forecast. Every day, I risk arrest. Deportation. Worse. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Why didn't the shelter help you fix it? They tried. The system didn't. One shoulder lifted. I survived Qatar. I can survive this. Qatar? He repeated. Alex didn't want to talk about it. Not here, not surrounded by frightened mothers, and the man who could destroy the entire block with a phone call. But his son slept against her heart, trusting her body more deeply than anyone should. That trust deserved truth. I was trafficked, she said simply. Domestic work, locked inside a house, no pay, no passport, no escape. Seo Jun's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened with something brutal. Who hurt you? That's not your concern. It is if you're caring for my son. No. Her gaze hardened. It isn't. Not unless you plan to own me too. The shelter went still. His voice dropped, almost a growl. I don't own people. Maybe not directly, but men like you consume everything around them. A muscle jumped in his cheek, but he didn't argue. Instead, he looked down at his child again, at the fragile quiet he seemed terrified to lose. How did you get away? He asked. She hesitated. Then, I waited, saved scraps of food, watched their schedules, climbed out a bathroom window one night while the woman of the house was screaming at her husband. Ran until my feet bled. Her fingers unconsciously stroked Byeol's back. A Nigerian pastor in Doha helped me buy a one-way ticket to Korea. I thought I'd find work, safety. A place that didn't hurt. And you found this, Seo Jun murmured. Alex looked around the cramped room. It's not perfect, but it's better than before. Seo Jun exhaled slowly, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles went white. I can protect you. She stiffened. No. I can get you legal status. No. I can move you into a safe apartment, guards, medical care, anything. Absolutely not. He stared at her, bewildered. Men did not tell him no. Syndicate leaders, politicians, CEOs. They all bent if he pushed hard enough. But this woman, wrapped in a second-hand cloth with spit-up drying on her shoulder, looked at him like his power meant nothing. And maybe, in this room, it didn't. You don't understand, he said, quietly. I'm not asking you to serve me. I'm asking you to help him. His voice cracked again. He needs you. That's not the same as me needing you, she replied. He opened his mouth, closed it again. For once, the sharp man of shadows had no ready answer. In the hallway, two of his lieutenants whispered urgently. This woman is a problem, one muttered. She has control over the air, over the boss. The council will use it. They'll say his judgment is compromised. The words drifted in, barely audible. Alex didn't react. Seo Jun did. His eyes narrowed with cold fury, but before he could bark an order, Byeol shifted in her arms, whining softly. Instantly, his entire body tensed, fear swallowing anger. Alex adjusted her hold. The baby settled. Seo Jun exhaled like he'd been drowning. You see? His voice was ragged. He won't tolerate anyone else. Not the nannies, not the doctors, not even me. Only you. That's not my fault, Alex said gently. It's not a fault, he said. It's a lifeline. She swallowed. Her heart ached at the sight of him, this terrifying, powerful man reduced to a trembling father whose world hinged on the rhythm of his son's breaths. But her dignity mattered. Her freedom mattered. Listen, she said softly. I will help him. I'm not heartless, but I won't be bought, and I won't be owned. Tell me what you want, Seo Jun said. Anything. Alex met his gaze, steady, unafraid. I want to make my own choices, she said. If I stay with the baby, It's because I choose to, not because you trap me with threats or gifts. Something in his expression shifted. Respect, maybe, or awe, or the stunned realization that he'd just met someone he couldn't command. Then choose, he murmured. She looked down at Byeol, asleep and safe. She remembered the first time she'd held another woman's child in this shelter, crying, hungry, abandoned, and how something inside her cracked open in a way she couldn't close again. I'll stay, she said. For him. Seo Jun closed his eyes with relief so profound it nearly broke him. But, she added sharply, I stay on my terms. He nodded. On your terms. Outside, his lieutenants exchanged horrified looks. The boss was bending. The boss was showing softness, weakness. And in Seoul's underworld, weakness had a scent, one that predators never ignored. But inside the shelter, Byeol slept against Alex's heartbeat. And the most dangerous man in Korea vowed silently that no one, not his enemies, not his counsel, not even fate, would take this fragile miracle away. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Alex was rocking Byeol in the dim back room of the shelter, humming a low Igbo lullaby, when two unfamiliar men in cheap suits lingered too long near the doorway. They asked too many questions, asked to see paperwork no one ever had, asked about the foreign woman with the infant. The shelter director's smile trembled as she lied. The men left polite business cards on the front desk. Polite like a knife wrapped in silk. Immigration. Alex felt the old terror bloom in her chest. Cold, breathless. Seo Jun arrived minutes after they departed, storming in with his guards, the air around him sharp and electric with danger. The shelter's babies began crying instantly, every instinct warning them that a predator had entered the room. But not Byeol. Byeol simply opened his eyes and reached toward the familiar voice. Alex swallowed. I didn't call them, she said, before he could speak. I know, he replied. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the card on the table like it was a death threat. It was. The council, he murmured. They think you make me weak. They're making their move. She tightened her hold on the sleeping child. They want me deported. It would break him. Alex looked down. Byeol was growing rounder, warmer, softer. Tiny improvements that made her heart ache with pride. A child who'd been starving for 43 days now sighed in his sleep with contentment. What are you going to do? She asked. Seo Jun didn't answer. Not then. Not until late that night in the tiny shelter kitchen lit by one flickering fluorescent bulb. He found her washing bottles, her sleeves rolled up, her hair wrapped in a worn cloth. He looked undone. The prideful man trying to hold himself together with threads. We need to talk, he said. She didn't turn around. If it's about immigration, I already know. I'll run if I must. You won't run. Yes, I will. She scrubbed harder. I've escaped worse. I'm not letting you go. She finally faced him. I'm not yours to keep. He swallowed. Then, with the strangest expression, determination mixed with something almost like dread, he said, marry me. Alex blinked, then laughed, hard. The sound echoed off the metal counters, almost hysterical. She braced herself on the sink. Oh, you're out of your mind, she managed. Marriage? In a shelter kitchen? You're proposing like this? He stiffened but held his ground. Marriage gives you legal residency, protection, status. It gets immigration off your back permanently. And what does it give you? Control of the narrative, he said honestly. If you're my wife, the council can't touch you. Or him. Alex stared at him. So this is just strategic. He hesitated, a beat too long. It's necessary, he finished. She shook her head. And if I refuse, they'll take you. His voice cracked. And he will break. The silence between them thickened until she felt it on her skin. Seo Jun stepped closer, lowering his voice. I will give you money, a house, guards, anything you want. She raised her chin. I told you. I don't want your money. He gritted his teeth. Then what do you want? Alex looked at Byeol asleep in the sling against her chest, at his tiny fingers curled near her heart, at the weight of him, real, warm, alive. She thought of Qatar, of locks and orders, of being owned. Her voice trembled when she answered, not with fear, but with conviction. I want your word, she said, that you will never let anyone hurt this child. Not your enemies, not your men, not your world. Seo Jun froze, because she wasn't asking for safety for herself. She was demanding protection for his son, the one thing he valued more than anything, maybe more than power, more than pride. And she wanted his word, something sacred to a man like him. Seo Jun's throat bobbed. I swear, he said quietly. On my name, on everything I am, I will protect him. Always. Something shifted between them, subtle, fragile, terrifying. A spark caught. Not romance, not love. Something raw, a binding of fates neither asked for. Alex nodded once. Then, I'll marry you. The registry office was cold, fluorescent, and nearly empty. A bored civil servant stamped papers without looking at either of them. Seo Jun wore a plain black jacket. Alex wore the same dress she'd worn the day she arrived at the shelter. He bought 2 cheap silver rings from a convenience store on the way. Small, thin, almost laughably flimsy. The kind teenagers bought for matching accessories. They stood in front of the clerk, awkward and stiff. No photos, Alex insisted. Of course, Seo Jun agreed instantly. The clerk asked if they would exchange vows. We already did, Alex said quietly, touching the sling where Byeol slept. And that was that. Paperwork signed, rings slid on. A marriage so quiet the world didn't hear it. Not yet. Days passed. Byeol began to transform. He gained weight, slow but steady. His skin grew less gray, his cries less frantic. He learned to sleep for 2 hours at a time, sometimes 3. And when he opened his eyes, he searched for Alex with an instinct that cut Seo Jun to the bone. Jealousy wasn't something he was used to, but it burned, sharp and humiliating, every time the baby calmed instantly at her touch and wailed at his. Alex noticed. She didn't comment. But one night, when Byeol refused to settle in his crib, she placed the tiny boy carefully into Seo Jun's arms and guided the man's huge hands into a secure cradle. Just breathe, she whispered. He feels everything. If you panic, he panics. Seo Jun stiffened. I'm not panicking. You are definitely panicking. He glared at her, but the corner of her mouth tilted up slightly. He looked down at his son, smaller than both his palms. So fragile, so warm, and for the first time, Byeol didn't cry. He blinked up at his father, curious, calm. Seo Jun's breath hitched. Alex looked away, giving him privacy for a moment more intimate than anything their new marriage required. Slowly, quietly, something started to grow. Not trust, not yet, but an uneasy bond, a reluctant softness. 2 lives forced together by danger, held together by a child who needed them both. And deep in the shadows of Seoul, the Black Dragon Council watched with rising fury. They were asking for trouble the moment they decided to host a Byeol in a 5-star hotel. But for once, Seo Jun wanted tradition. He wanted photos for his son's future, memories not stained in fear. A night where Byeol, finally thriving, cheeks full and eyes bright, could be celebrated as though he belonged to a normal family, even if nothing about this family was normal. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, low candlelight, silk banners the color of deep jade. Tables overflowed with fruit towers and rice cakes, and imported dishes Alex couldn't name. The guests wore masks, as was Black Dragon custom for closed circle gatherings. White for allies, black for enforcers, gold for elders. The air smelled of money, powder, and tension. Alex felt every eye on her. As Seo Jun's wife, she stood at his side. But she was also the outsider, the undocumented woman upgraded overnight into the mother of the syndicate's heir. And now, she carried Byeol on her hip, healthy, curious, tugging at her necklace. A few lieutenants nodded respectfully. Others looked at her like she was a crack in the foundation. The council elders, stern, ancient men in golden masks, watched her with something colder, calculating, waiting. Byeol clapped his hands at the sound of the ensemble starting up. Alex kissed his cheek. "Happy 100 days, my little star," she whispered. Seo Jun stood only inches away, close enough to guard her, but far enough to keep up appearances. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes never stopped moving, counting exits, reading body language, tracking whispers. He leaned slightly toward her. "If anything happens," he murmured, "do not wait for me. You run, understand?" Alex shot him a glare. "You don't get to order me." "I'm not ordering you," he said softly. "I'm begging you." She froze, because he meant it, because fear laced his voice. "Nothing's going to happen," she said, mostly because he seemed to need the reassurance. He didn't answer. The first toast began, an elder stepping onto the stage, lifting a glass to the continuation of a powerful legacy. And then, as he spoke the word legacy, something in Alex's body went rigid. A prickling at the back of her neck, a shift in the air, a whisper of intent. She didn't know why she felt it, but Seo Jun must have felt it too. He grabbed her wrist. Too late. The chandeliers exploded. Gunfire ripped across the ballroom, sharp, deafening, tearing through silk banners and bodies alike. Guests screamed, diving under tables. Masked gunmen stormed in from the side entrances, firing deliberately toward the one target that mattered. Alex, or rather, Byeol. Seo Jun moved faster than thought, shoving her to the ground and covering her with his own body. Glass rained down. Bullets cracked past his head. He returned fire without looking, pulling a pistol from the small of his back and shooting with precision carved from years of violence. "Keep him down!" he shouted, voice raw. Alex curled over Byeol, shielding the baby with her entire body. She felt Seo Jun jerk, the sick, awful jolt of a bullet hitting flesh. Her heart stopped. "Seo Jun!" "I'm fine," he snarled, firing again. "Just move!" They crawled behind an overturned banquet table, linen soaked instantly with someone's spilled blood. More gunmen surged forward, pushing through the chaos. "Council!" Seo Jun spat. Those old bastards finally made their move. One of his lieutenants slid behind the table with them, clutching a machine pistol. "Boss, east exit is compromised. West exit blocked. They want the heir dead." Alex's blood ran cold. Byeol whimpered, frightened, but alive. Seo Jun's expression shifted, beautiful and terrifying. A man who would raise the world if it kept his family breathing. "We're going out the service corridor," he ordered. "That's suicide," the lieutenant said. "Then die behind me," Seo Jun hissed. "Or move." He dragged the table aside and pulled Alex to her feet. She stayed plastered to his back as he shot his way across the ballroom. Methodical, brutal, a relentless force tearing through the ambush. Gunmen dropped. Screams rose. The council elders fled through a hidden door, cowards in gold masks. Once inside the service corridor, the fight grew claustrophobic. Narrow hallways, stainless steel walls, muffled gunshots ricocheting like thunder. One attacker lunged from a side door. Alex reacted before she could think, swinging the heavy diaper bag squarely into his face. He collapsed. She didn't look twice. Byeol cried into her shoulder. "It's okay," Alex whispered, shaking. "Mommy's here. Mommy's here." They reached the loading dock. Seo Jun covered their escape with more fire, blood soaking through his shirt, staggering slightly but refusing to fall. A black SUV screeched around the corner. His men hauled them inside. The doors slammed shut. Only when the SUV sped away did Alex realize she was sobbing. "Are you hit?" she demanded, turning to him. Seo Jun leaned back, breath shallow, hand pressed to his side. "Just grazed." "That's not a graze." He smiled weakly. "It sounds better." Byeol, exhausted from crying, finally hiccuped into sleep. The SUV flew through back alleys toward one of Seo Jun's safe houses, a nondescript apartment building with steel-reinforced walls and no neighbors. Inside, Alex laid Byeol in the crib. Her hand shook. When she returned to the living room, Seo Jun was sitting on the couch, shirt off, blood streaked across his ribs. One of his men disinfected the wound while he stared at the floor, jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. Alex stood before him. "Look at me," she said. He did, and she saw it. All the fear he had hidden, all the rage he'd buried, all the regret flooding to the surface. "Tonight wasn't a warning," Alex said. "It was a promise. They will come again, and again, as long as you're in that life." He didn't argue. She stepped closer until she could smell the smoke on his skin. "But I will not raise this child in an empire of blood, and I will not let him grow up a target." "Alex? No." Her voice broke. "You want a family, then choose one. Your empire or us." Seo Jun's breath stuttered. His men pretended not to listen. Alex held his gaze, steady, unflinching, fierce. "You can't have both," she whispered. And for the first time in his ruthless, legendary life, Seo Jun realized he might truly lose something he couldn't replace. His son, his wife, his only fragile hope of redemption. And now, he had to choose. Seo Jun didn't answer Alex that night. He didn't rage, didn't negotiate, didn't plead. He simply stood, walked to the window of the safe house, and stared out at the sleeping city he ruled like a silent god. Alex took Byeol to the bedroom, heart pounding. She expected him to follow, to argue, to tell her she didn't understand what she was asking, but he didn't. He stayed there until dawn, unmoving, unreadable, a shadow carved against the first pale light. When Alex woke again, the crib beside her was empty. Seo Jun was gone. The fall began before sunrise. It was precise, surgical, a dismantling of an empire that had taken generations to build. "The boss has issued a black directive," whispered one lieutenant to another as they armed themselves. "No survivors? No mercy. No hesitation." Throughout Seoul, still hours before the morning rush, doors were kicked in and old betrayals were settled. Seo Jun moved through it all like a storm given human flesh. He walked into a gambling den run by Oksu, one of the council elders who had ordered the hit on Byeol. Oksu's guards recognized him too late. Gunfire ripped through the room. Quick, efficient. When the smoke cleared, only Seo Jun remained standing amid the overturned tables and blood-streaked tiles. He found Oksu hiding behind a steel safe, shaking. "You tried to kill my son," Oksu begged, cried, reached for excuses. Seo Jun didn't listen. The shot was clean, far quieter than Oksu deserved. In a warehouse on the edge of Incheon Port, he confronted the logistics chief, an old friend, a man who had once carried Seo Jun's father's coffin. The man didn't fight, didn't deny. "They said you were losing yourself," he said, quietly. "Over a woman, over a child." Seo Jun stared at him. "I found myself." Then he fired. His hand trembled only after the man fell. Meanwhile, on the 21st floor of the Black Dragon headquarters, servers whirred to life as terabytes of data were uploaded to anonymous sources. Documents detailing the alliances and crimes of syndicates across East Asia. Offshore accounts, shipment routes, corrupt officials, secret ports, a digital firestorm, a purge of criminal architecture. Seo Jun had ordered all of it. He didn't care if the rivals burned. He didn't care if they hunted him after. Only that the Black Dragon name no longer hung around his son's neck like a chain. By mid-morning, raids hit 5 rival gangs simultaneously. Information handed over by Seo Jun himself. The police thought it was a miracle. The rivals thought it was war. It was neither. It was a man choosing what kind of father he wanted to be. The last phase was the hardest, the shutting down, the unraveling, the deliberate death of the Black Dragon Syndicate, not with a grand explosion or a final battle, but with a series of signatures on legal documents. One by one, he terminated every illegal operation. The drug pipelines, the extortion rackets, the laundering fronts, the underground casinos. Entire fortunes went dark, and then, unthinkably, he emptied his clean accounts. Not to offshore banks, not to Cayman vaults, to a single entity he created minutes earlier. The Byeol Foundation for Neurodivergent Children, refugee mothers, and families caught in the teeth of systems that didn't care. He transferred buildings, stocks, investments, properties, even his personal penthouse. Every legitimate asset he owned became a lifeline for strangers who would never know what it cost him. His lieutenants watched in stunned silence. "You're ending us," one whispered. "I'm ending me," Seo Jun corrected. "You can all go, live your lives, or join the old guard if you want. I won't stop you." "And what about the elders who escaped?" another asked. Seo Jun holstered his gun. His eyes were cold, ancient. "They'll come for me. Let them." Because now he had something worth dying for. Alex didn't see him again until late afternoon. He entered the safe house covered in blood and dust, smelling of gunpowder and rain. His knuckles were split, his shirt torn, his expression unreadable. Alex held Byeol tighter. "What did you do?" she breathed. "Everything," he said, voice hollow. He dropped a thick envelope on the table. It spilled government-stamped documents, residency, citizenship application, a legitimate marriage registration, filed properly this time, an adoption confirmation recognizing her as Byeol's legal mother. Alex could barely speak. You did all of this in a day?" "No." He sank onto the couch, exhausted. "I did it in a lifetime. Today, I just finished it." She stepped closer, heart twisting. "Seo Jun, your syndicate. Gone." Her breath caught. "All of it?" All that mattered to the world. His gaze softened faintly. The rest still exists. The broken pieces. The men who won't forgive me. The enemies who now see an opportunity. So they'll come. Yes. And they'll try to kill you. He nodded, calmly. Eventually. Alex sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched. She studied his profile, the hardened lines, the bruises, the quiet devastation. You did this for him, she whispered. And for you, he admitted, almost inaudibly, but also for myself. I didn't know how much I hated who I'd become until I saw what you expected of me. Her throat tightened. You changed everything, and I will spend the rest of my life paying for it. Silence settled, a heavy, trembling thing. Alex reached out and touched his hand. It flinched, not from pain, from disbelief. You're different, she said softly. Still dangerous, still impossible, but you're not the man who walked into that shelter anymore. I don't know who I am now, he confessed. You're Byeol's father, she said. That's enough. He closed his eyes. A single breath shuddered out of him, the breath of a man who had destroyed an empire and found himself standing in its ashes. The Black Dragon Syndicate lay fractured. The old guard vanished into the shadows, vowing revenge. The criminal world trembled at the sudden power vacuum. But in the quiet of the safe house, Seo Jun finally felt clean. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a king. He was simply a man who chose his family over his throne. And now, the world would come for him. The courtroom felt less like a place of justice and more like an execution chamber dressed in marble and fluorescent lights. Reporters packed the aisles, cameras flashing with the rabid hunger of wolves. Lawyers whispered, security tightened. And at the center of it all, sitting stiff and stone-faced, Seo Jun felt a strange sensation he hadn't known since childhood. Fear. Not of death, not of betrayal, but of losing his son. Beside him, Alex adjusted the knot of the Ankara wrapper slung across her chest. Byeol slept against her back, breathing softly, cheek pressed to the familiar warmth he trusted more than anything on earth. She stood tall, despite the stairs, regal, despite the worn fabric, unshaken, despite the chaos. If anyone in the room looked like royalty, it wasn't the disgraced Mafia king under siege. It was the refugee mother who had nothing but her dignity and still refused to bow. The opposing counsel approached with the smirk of someone who believed the verdict was already purchased. The council has deep concerns, he began, voice dripping honeyed poison. Concerns about the safety of the child, concerns about the legitimacy of this relationship. His gaze slithered over Alex. Concerns about ulterior motives, opportunistic behavior, and the questionable immigration status of... Seo Jun's fist slammed onto the table before he even realized he'd moved. The entire room flinched, but Alex placed a hand on his arm without looking at him. Let him talk, she murmured. Her calm was a blade sharper than any he'd carried. The lawyer continued, emboldened. Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that Ms. Okafor manipulated a vulnerable man. That she used intimate methods to ensnare the father of this child and gain... Alex rose. Everyone else went silent. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She didn't tremble. Your Honor, she said, may I speak? The judge, a stern woman with decades of hard cases behind her, nodded slowly. Proceed. Alex stepped forward, Byeol still wrapped to her back, and placed a folder on the judge's bench with the finality of a gavel strike. These are medical records from Seoul Central Pediatrics, she said. documenting Byeol's weight loss under professional care, documenting his sensory overload, documenting the failure of every formula, specialist, and nanny. Pages whispered as the judge flipped through them. And these, Alex continued, placing a second folder, are the records from the last month, under my care, my body, my milk. The weight charts told a story no lawyer could twist. He had gone from failing to thrive, to surviving, to finally living. The opposing counsel scoffed, "Your Honor, we hardly need to entertain a sentimental story. This woman was undocumented." Alex's head tilted. "And because I do not have a paper, I do not have a heart, because I fled something monstrous. I am incapable of protecting a child from something monstrous." A ripple moved through the court. She stepped closer to the stand, every movement graceful, unwavering. "Do you know what happens to a child who cannot latch, who cannot be soothed, who screams until his body begins to give out?" Her voice softened. "Not weak, devastating. He dies." The word hit like a dropped stone. Seo Jun swallowed hard. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for the tiny heartbeat tied to her spine. The old counsel lawyer regained composure, lips curling. "Your Honor, what we have here is a foreign wet nurse who seduced a dangerous man and now seeks protection." Alex didn't let him finish. With a single fluid motion, she loosened the knot of her wrapper. Byeol stirred from sleep, mewled softly, searching. And in front of every lawyer, every journalist, every flashing camera, Alex turned, unwrapped him, and cradled him to her chest. The gasp was collective. Byeol latched instantly. His tiny fists relaxed, his breath settled. Peace descended like a divine command. Alex looked at the lawyer over her son's head. "Tell me," she said quietly, "does this look like seduction to you?" Seconds stretched. No one answered. "Does this child look exploited? Does he look harmed? Does he look anything but safe?" Her eyes, dark and unmovable, swept across the room. "If this court believes he should be taken away from the only place he has ever known comfort, say it now. I will listen." Silence. Total. Powerful. Even the judge seemed caught in the spell of the moment, a reminder that justice existed for the small and voiceless only when the brave chose to speak. Seo Jun felt something break loose in his chest, something he'd kept locked away for decades. Pride. Not in the syndicate he'd built, not in the empire he'd toppled, but in the woman feeding his son in front of an entire nation, daring anyone to deny the truth her body made undeniable. The judge cleared her throat, voice steady but softer now. "I have heard enough." She removed her glasses and set them down. "In all my years on this bench, I have never witnessed a clearer demonstration of parental devotion. Ms. Okafor, your actions have saved this child's life. Your commitment is evident, unwavering, and, frankly, irrefutable." She turned to Seo Jun. "As for you, Mr. Seo, your history is complicated, but your dissolution of the Black Dragon Syndicate is verified. Your cooperation with law enforcement is ongoing, and your willingness to relinquish your power is something this court will not ignore." She picked up her gavel. "This court finds the marriage valid. A strike. Custody is granted to both Mr. Seo Jun and Ms. Alexandra Okafor. Another strike. The child, Byeol, will remain under their joint protection. Final strike. Court adjourned. Chaos exploded instantly. Reporters shouting, cameras firing, the old counsel's lawyers cursing under their breath. But in the center of it all, Alex and Seo Jun simply looked at each other. She still cradled Byeol. He still sat frozen in shock. And between them was something fragile and fierce, rising from the ashes of the life he destroyed to protect them. "We won," she murmured. He shook his head. "No," he whispered, voice raw. "You did." She smiled then, small, tired, devastatingly real. "Maybe, but he's ours." Byeol sighed against her skin, tiny lips still latched, blissfully unaware that the world had just been forced to bend for him. And for the first time since the beginning, Seo Jun believed the world could. The first warning was the silence. Not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping home, but a sudden mechanical void, as if the building itself inhaled and refused to exhale. The lights blinked once, twice, then Seoul's skyline vanished, swallowed by darkness. Seo Jun lifted his head from the financial report spread across the penthouse table. His instincts, honed from decades in the Black Dragon's shadow, sharpened instantly. Power cut, not an accident, a declaration. The elevator stilled with a metallic groan. In the distance, down on the 70th floor hallway, a door slammed open. Then another. Footsteps, too many, too coordinated. They were coming. He stood, bare feet silent against the cold marble, silk pajamas whispering around him. For a man who once commanded hundreds, he looked strangely human, unarmed, exhausted, illuminated only by the faint emergency strip lighting along the floor. But inside him, something ancient and lethal rolled awake. "They want my family. Let them try." The first assault hit like thunder. The penthouse door shuddered as a battering ram struck it. Once, twice, the reinforced steel bent inward, screaming. "Alex!" Seo Jun hissed under his breath as he crossed the living room. "Down! Now!" But Alex was already moving. In the nursery, she gathered the babies, the 3 shelter infants she still fed during the day. Each one transferred to her care when their mothers needed rest. Byeol nested against her chest, sensing the terror in the air. She hummed, low and steady, the same tune she used in the shelter during power outages, during immigration raids, during nights when every child woke trembling. The door buckled. Metal shrieked. Then the world exploded inward. Gunfire ripped through the penthouse. Shadows spilled across the floor. Half a dozen men, masked, armed, moving with military precision. The final loyalists of the shattered Black Dragon, the ones who had sworn to restore the old order. And they weren't here to negotiate. Seo Jun was already in motion, grabbing the first attacker by the forearm, twisting, snapping bone. The gun discharged into the floor as Seo Jun wrenched it free and used it like a hammer, crushing a jaw, then an orbital socket. Blood sprayed across his silk pajama top, warm against the thin fabric. 3 more men surged forward. He moved through them barefoot, silent, merciless. A knee shattered. A throat closed under his elbow. A blade flashed. He caught the wrist, bent it backward until the knife clattered uselessly. But there were too many, and they weren't aiming at him. "Find the woman! Find the baby!" The words ignited something feral in him. He lunged, but a gunshot cracked, bright and unforgiving. Pain tore through his side. He stumbled, gasping as the bullet seared deep into muscle. Another shot followed. His shoulder jerked violently. His back hit the wall. Blood slid down his ribs, warm, slick. Still, he rose. Still, he fought. One man tried to race toward the nursery. Seo Jun grabbed him by the back of the neck, dragged him down, slammed his head against the marble until the body stopped twitching. The room tilted. His breath stuttered, but he kept going. In the nursery, Alex pressed her back to the wall. Children cradled around her like fragile embers. She would burn the world to protect. Byeol whimpered, sensing his father's pain. Alex tightened her grip. She heard Seo Jun's footsteps, uneven, dragging. He appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, bare feet leaving smears of blood on the floor. For a moment, she thought he might collapse, but he looked at her first, always at her. The man who once commanded death with a nod now looked like a wounded guardian, crawling through shadows because his family breathed on the other side. "Stay back!" he rasped. His knees buckled. She caught him before he hit the floor, lowering him gently, shielding the babies with her body. His blood soaked into her Ankara wrapper, warm and terrifying. His fingers brushed her cheek. "Alex," his voice cracked, "I told you I would protect you. And I told you," she whispered fiercely, "that protection goes both ways." Footsteps thundered down the hallway. More men, shouting. She cupped his face in her palm. "Stay for us, Seo Jun. Stay alive for us." His eyes flickered, darkness creeping in from the edges. He wanted to promise. He wanted to swear it. But all he could manage was a strained breath against her hand. The attackers reached the nursery door, and then gunfire erupted behind them, precise, disciplined, familiar. Seo Jun's loyal soldiers stormed the penthouse, black-clad and brutal. They cut down the traitors in seconds, dragging bodies aside, securing the floor, shouting, "Boss! Boss! Stay awake!" Alex shouted for a medic. Hands lifted Seo Jun from her lap, pressing gauze to his wounds, checking his pulse, barking orders. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but even half-conscious, he searched for one thing, one anchor in the chaos. "Alex, I'm here," she said, gripping his hand. "And Byeol." She lifted the baby into his line of sight. Byeol blinked sleepily, tiny fist curled around her wrapper. Seo Jun's breath hitched, something like relief, something like surrender. He was still alive, barely, because of her. The soldiers secured the penthouse, clearing remains, restoring emergency generators, checking for explosives. Blood pooled across marble, streaked in arcs where bodies had fallen. Bullet holes pocked the walls. Furniture lay splintered. But in the nursery, surrounded by soft toys and warm light from backup lanterns, Alex rocked the babies, her song steady despite her shaking hands. When a medic knelt beside her, he said, "He should make it, ma'am. He shouldn't, but somehow he will." Alex closed her eyes, not in relief, in gratitude fierce enough to burn. "He will," she whispered, staring down at the infant on her chest, "because he's not fighting for an empire anymore." She leaned over Seo Jun, brushing a blood-matted strand of hair from his forehead. "He's fighting for a family." The first warm winds of spring swept across Seoul, carrying with them the faintest dust of cherry blossoms, soft, pink, unhurried. They floated over the city like blessings, settling on traffic lights, bus stops, and the shoulders of strangers. Higher still, on the rooftop of the new community center, they drifted across the man who once ruled the city's underworld like a storm. Now, Seo Jun stood behind a podium set before a single camera crew, the quiet hum of live broadcast satellites glinting beneath the morning sun. His posture was rigid, but not with menace, only with the weight of what he was about to do. Alex watched from the edge of the rooftop garden, Byeol strapped lazily to her chest, dreaming his small, warm dreams. His arms dangled in peaceful abandon, the soft huff of his breaths syncing with the breeze. The world below bustled in ignorance. But by evening, they would all know. This was the day an empire died, and the day a father was born. The cameraman lifted a hand, 3 fingers, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Seo Jun exhaled, slow, deliberate, and addressed the nation. "My name," he began, "is Seo Jun of the Black Dragon." No one else on Earth could have said that without trembling. But the man in the silk gray suit, scars barely hidden beneath the collar, spoke with a clarity clean as glass. "I took power when I was 19. I built an empire of fear because it was the only language I knew. I believed strength meant being untouchable." A pedal drifted onto the podium. He paused. "I was wrong." Across Seoul, televisions in convenience stores flickered. Phones lit up in cafes. Street-side restaurants muted their radios. Taxi drivers turned up the volume. The city leaned in. "Months ago," he continued, "my son was dying. In all my wealth, all my influence, all my ruthlessness, I could not save him." His throat tightened. The microphone caught the breath he swallowed. But a woman without a country saved him with her compassion, with her body, with her will. Alex lowered her gaze, her cheeks warming. The city remained silent, riveted. Because of her, I understood something I had never grasped. Power is not the ability to take life. It is the duty to protect it. He reached into his pocket and lifted a stamped document. Thick, official, final. "Today, I am dissolving the Black Dragon Syndicate, effective immediately, permanently." Even the wind seemed to stop to listen. All illicit operations have been shut down. All accounts frozen. All documents, evidence, and internal files have been handed over to federal authorities. Somewhere in Seoul, old council survivors surely punched walls and screamed at the sky. But their shouts would be drowned out by something much louder: hope. "But I am not destroying this to escape guilt," he said. "I am destroying it because I choose to build something else." He lifted a second folder, stamped with a new crest, a small star, cradled in 2 hands. "The entirety of our legitimate assets, every clean investment, every lawful holding, has been transferred to the Byeol and Alex Foundation. Its purpose is simple." He looked directly into the camera, eyes steady: "To protect neurodivergent children and to shelter refugee mothers." The rooftop felt brighter somehow. Alex's breath hitched. And the city, once ruled by his knives, listened to the steady heartbeat beneath his words. "This is the last time I will speak as the Black Dragon's leader," he said. "After today, that name will belong to no one. Not to a man, not to a legend, not to a ghost." His voice softened. "I choose my son. I choose my wife. I choose a life that begins instead of one that destroys." He bowed, not as a king, but as a man. The broadcast ended, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Cheers erupted in small pockets of the city. Former victims, families who lost sons to gang wars, mothers who prayed for peace. Some wept openly. Others watched in stunned disbelief. Some of his old lieutenants, those who survived the night of long knives, bowed their heads behind closed doors in private, silent loyalty. And a few, those who clung to the old ways, spat on the ground, vowing revenge. But they were relics now, artifacts from a past no one wanted to return to. For the first time in decades, Seoul seemed to breathe easier. And the man responsible for a lifetime of shadows finally stepped into the sun. The rooftop emptied of cameras. Staff carried cords away. The broadcast desk folded into neat compartments, but the cherry blossoms remained, falling like quiet applause around him. Seo Jun loosened his tie and turned toward Alex. She watched him with an expression he'd never seen before. Not admiration, not surprise, something deeper, something earned. Byeol stirred against her, letting out a little grunt that sounded like a complaint about sunlight. Alex kissed the top of his head, her lips brushing the soft fuzz of his hair. "You did it," she said softly. "No," he replied. "We did." He walked toward her, not with swagger or swaggering confidence, but with a fragile, relieved steadiness. "How many people will believe you?" she asked. "Enough," he said. "And those who don't matter anymore." "And the ones who want revenge?" He glanced down at her hands, one resting on Byeol's back, the other still holding the strap of the baby wrap. "They will find that I no longer fight for myself," he said, "which makes me infinitely more dangerous." She lifted a brow. "You're not supposed to sound proud of that." He smiled, small and tired. "Then I'll work on it." The wind shifted again, carrying more petals, swirling them around their feet. Byeol reached out, half asleep, trying to catch one. Alex's voice gentled. "What now?" "That depends," he murmured, stepping closer. "On something I should have asked you on a day that wasn't fueled by fear." He reached into his jacket, and this time, the box in his hand wasn't cheap, wasn't bought in panic, wasn't an exchange of survival. It was velvet, deep blue, holding the weight of intention. Alex froze. "Seo Jun." He dropped to one knee, not the other way around this time. "Alexandra Okafor," he said, lifting the ring. "I married you once out of necessity, out of desperation, out of fear. But today, I ask you to marry me again. Not because we need it." The rooftop blurred behind her, "but because I love you." Her breath caught, not from shock, not exactly, but from the undeniable truth settling into her bones. A truth she had tried not to examine too closely. She looked down at him, the man who once inspired terror, now kneeling so softly his shadow seemed to bow with him. Byeol stirred, blinked awake, and looked at his father as if he understood the gravity. Seo Jun smiled faintly. "I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you," he said. "Not out of fate, not out of deals, but because every day with you has shown me who I want to be." Her throat tightened. "And who is that?" she whispered. "A man worthy of this family." The wind rustled her wrapper. Cherry blossoms landed on the velvet box like blessings. She exhaled, a tiny laugh escaping, half disbelief, half joy. "You don't kneel to anyone?" she murmured. "I kneel to you," he said simply, "because you're the only one who ever made me rise." Her eyes stung. She lowered her hand. "Yes," she said. "Of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, one that fit her perfectly, one chosen for her, not for convenience. They kissed gently, quietly, their foreheads pressed together, while Byeol babbled between them like he was officiating. 2 weeks later, the new community center opened its doors. The sign read, Byeol I Gym. The burden of Byeol, an old Korean phrase meaning the weight one carries with love. Inside, children laughed freely across bright hallways, painted with murals of stars and oceans. Therapy rooms glowed with soft lighting. A breastfeeding lounge welcomed mothers with plush seating and privacy curtains. A sensory room hummed with low vibrations and weighted blankets. Refugee mothers, Ethiopian, Syrian, Nigerian, Burmese, sat together, trading stories in a mixture of languages that somehow fit together with ease. Alex walked the halls with Byeol on her hip, showing him the rooms built in his name. The baby she once nursed in the shelter crawled across mats, now plump and healthy. Their mothers bowed gratefully when they saw her. She hugged them one by one, her heart fuller than she knew it could hold. And in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, stood Seo Jun. No weapons, no soldiers, no empire at his back. Just a soft, fiercely determined warmth in his gaze as he watched Alex guide a shy toddler toward a basket of sensory toys. One of the children fell. Alex swooped in instantly, her voice soothing. Seo Jun's chest ached, with affection, with awe, with a quiet promise he would never again allow life to take this from them. A staff member approached him carefully. Director Seo, should we prepare additional security at the back entrance? He glanced at Alex, at Byeol's tiny hand, gripping her sleeve. Yes, he said, and double the security for the mother's wing. But his voice wasn't threatening. It was protective, human, fatherly. As the afternoon sun poured through the windows, casting gold onto the playmats, the man who once ruled the criminal underworld now stood guard at a door decorated with crayon stars. And everyone inside was safe because of him, because of her, because of the boy who had united them before he even understood the meaning of breath. That night, as the lights of Seoul shimmered below and Byeol slept between them, Alex rested her head on Seo Jun's shoulder. You really ended it, she murmured. His hand found hers. No, he said softly. I simply traded it. For what? He looked at her, at the child curled against their laps, at the life blooming around them. For this. And somewhere in the quiet, in a home finally free of ghosts, the truth settled like a heartbeat. The empire fell. A family rose.